AG, you can take all en bloc.
Yes, please.
Clauses 1 to 4.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill.
Madam Chair, I'm told by the drafters that we have a small typographical error to take care of at clause 4B, Roman 1.
Okay, so therefore, let me...
I apologize, I was
Let me
only
do
just
questions.
alerted to this. 1 to 3?
Yes.
Clauses 1 to 3.
The question is that clauses 1 to 3 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 3 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 3 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 4.
The question is that clause 4 stand part of the bill. Attorney General.
Madam Chair, in clause 4, subsection B, where we state in subsection 15, that should really be section 15 and nothing in brackets. So delete subsection, open brackets, 15, close brackets, and insert instead section 15 dash.
Right. Whip? Yes? Right. The question is that clause 4 be amended as follows: to delete the word sub before section, and to, or maybe I should say to delete the word subsection, open bracket 15, close bracket, and replace it with section 15.
Dash.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 4 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 4 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, the question is that the bill as amended now be reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will resume. Attorney General.
Speaker, I wish to report that the miscellaneous provisions, age of retirement of judges, interception and chief judicial officers bill 2019 was considered in committee of the whole and approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with this report from the committee.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the miscellaneous provisions, age of retirement judges, interpretation, and chief judicial officers bill 2019. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Constitution Prescribed Matters Act, Chapter 102, the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301, and the Judicial and Legal Services Act, Chapter 601, be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Constitution Prescribed Matters Act, Chapter 102, the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301, and the Judicial and Legal Services Act, Chapter 601, be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Constitution Prescribed Matters Act, Chapter 102, the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301, and the Judicial and Legal Service Act, Chapter 601.
Honorable members, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Wednesday, February 12, 2020, will be resumed. Be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, and the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 in the 5th Session, 11th Parliament. I now call upon the member for Diego Martin Northeast, who has 24 minutes of original speaking time remaining.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just let me refresh the memories of honorable members. What we are debating, or what I am winding up on, is the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, and the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019. On the last occasion, we on this side had got the impression that honorable members opposite would not support the legislation, despite its importance. And we got that impression because the Honorable Attorney General sat down twice and called upon honorable members opposite to declare whether they were supporting the package of bills or not. The member for Naparima was quite obstreperous in his response. He shouted out, "You can't bully me," but he didn't explain what he meant by that. The normal meaning of "you can't bully me" means that I will not comply with whatever you're asking for. The Honorable Member for Shogunas East was asked the same question by the Honorable Attorney General. I think he also gave way to allow the Honorable Member for Shogunas East to indicate whether he was supporting the package of bills or not. And the Honorable Member for Shogunas East said, "You can't distract me." So we had the Honorable Member for Naparima saying, "You can't bully me," and the Honorable Member for Shogunas East saying he will not be distracted. The Honorable Attorney General called upon the two honorable members to be specific. What are you saying? Either you're supporting the bill or not. And they chose not to be clear in any form or fashion. In fact, they were certainly unclear. But subsequent to that, after the two members involved refused to indicate whether they were supporting the legislation or not, we learned by way of a press release that mysteriously the opposition had had a caucus and had decided to support the legislation. However, we on this side are not members of the opposition caucus. We have no spies in that caucus. We do not receive reports from that caucus. I have never seen minutes from the UNC caucus. I did not receive any text messages, any WhatsApps, any emails, any, I think there are other forms of social media. Now you have Snapchat, you have Telegram, Twitter. I received no communication whatsoever, and nobody else on this side received any communication whatsoever that the opposition UNC had had a caucus and had decided in that caucus to support the package of bills. So I thought that was a bit in left field for the honorable member for Pointe-a-Pierre to claim that they had a caucus, implying that we should have known that they had a caucus and decided to support the bills. Anyway, the bottom line is, Madam Speaker, that we have received by way of a statement in the newspapers by the honorable member for Pointe-a-Pierre that they intend to support the bills.
Finally.
There's always a sting in the tail, though. Always. But before I go to that, I want to personally congratulate the Attorney General. And I do not associate myself with the remarks of the member for St. Augustine that the Attorney General needs to be careful about who is congratulating him. If we take that basket from the Honorable Member for St. Augustine, we would never congratulate anybody on this side. So I shall not, I've been around too long, I'm not taking that basket. So I want to personally congratulate the Attorney General. You see, Madam Speaker, this package of bills, mutual administrative assistance in tax matters, tax information exchange agreements, income tax amendment, are required to get Trinidad and Tobago off of a list, a non-compliant list, from a group called the Global Forum, which is comprised primarily of members of the OECD. There's also another group called the EU Council of Ministers. The EU Council of Ministers piggybacks on whatever the Global Forum says. And both of them piggyback on what FATF says. Now, within the Financial Action Task Force, which is the world body, you have regional bodies, and Trinidad and Tobago is a member of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force group. And Trinidad and Tobago, for one reason or another, was the first country to go through the final round of assessment by the Financial Action Task Force. The Attorney General, I must say, as Minister of Finance, my role has been to support the work of the Attorney General in this matter, even though it is the Financial Action Task Force. It deals with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing in particular. And the Attorney General has been at the forefront of this matter, always jumping on a plane. And we were a bit concerned in the beginning, you know, about all of these meetings, these FATF meetings where you have to send a big delegation comprising persons from the Ministry of Finance, from the police, from the Attorney General's office and various other agencies, and a series of interrogations over the last several years. And one of the places the Attorney General found himself in on several occasions was in Paris, because this is where a lot of it takes place, not so Attorney General. OECD headquarters. And in the last 4 years, the Attorney General has been principally responsible for the crafting, piloting, debating, and passage of some 23 pieces of legislation. Thank you. And I must say, like all of us, we were a bit concerned. You know, these organizations say if you do this, you will get off the list. But the goalposts are always moving, always moving. Every year is something new. They come up with some new thing. You have now base erosion, profit sharing, special economic zones. So I must say, when the Attorney General told us that he was off to Paris in February, just before Carnival, as a matter of fact, and he was quite confident that after Trinidad and Tobago was examined, interrogated, and FATF looked at the work done by Trinidad and Tobago, we would come off the FATF watch list. I must say that I, like most people, had a little skepticism. And therefore, it is the warmest congratulations I give to the Attorney General. The warmest congratulations. Yes. He did it. He did it with vigor. He did it with purpose. He did it with energy. And in February, on the 21st of February 2020, Trinidad and Tobago was officially removed from the FATF watch list or grey list, whatever you want to call it. And if you go to the FATF website, Madam Speaker, if you go to the FATF website and you look at the outcome of that forum, that meeting that took place in February of 2020. And you go there and you look under the heading country-specific processes. And you look under jurisdictions under increased monitoring. The only country that is listed as being no longer subject to monitoring on the FATF website is Trinidad and Tobago. I must congratulate the Attorney General for his work. You know, the media has a habit of publicizing things that are fashionable. This didn't really make the coverage it deserved. 4 years of hard work removing Trinidad and Tobago from the FATF blacklist and resolving issues with correspondent banking and all sorts of other things that we would have had if we had not achieved this. I wanted to let people know, it's a little known fact, that within the Caribbean, the Bahamas is on the FATF grey list. And while Trinidad and Tobago came off in that February meeting, these countries went on, Barbados and Jamaica. So whereas we came off, Bahamas went on late last year, and now Jamaica and Barbados in February have been put on the FATF grey list. So it's a fantastic achievement and should not be trivialized or underscored. It's a fantastic achievement. And so these matters before us, Madam Speaker, this will take us very far along the journey to getting us off the non-compliant list with the Global Forum. We've gone through these bills in great detail. We had a joint select committee. I must say the work in the joint select committee was quite collaborative, a bit different to the statements made in the Parliament. But that's how these things work. You know, members opposite, they're quite cooperative in committee and quite belligerent in the chamber. But I wish to report, Madam Speaker, that although the member for Pointe-a-Pierre had sent out a press release indicating that the opposition was going to support the bills, I received a telephone call and then an email from the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, who told me that the opposition would like us to look at two issues in two of the bills. And let me indicate what those issues are. The opposition, in order to give the necessary support, would like us to revisit the section in the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill that deals with legal professional privilege. And this was something that we took a lot of time in the committee talking about this. The senator from the other place, the opposition senator, Saddam Hussein, really spent a lot of time questioning the need to have a waiver of privilege in the legislation. We sought advice, and we were told by the OECD that that was a non-negotiable clause. However, when we looked at what the Leader of the Opposition sent to us yesterday evening, I passed it over to the Attorney General, and I'm very pleased to say that the Attorney General, with some fine-tuning, we can go along with the amendment proposed by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition with respect to the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill. In fact, the Attorney General has improved upon the proposed amendment by the Leader of the Opposition by making it very specific to the Mutual Legal Assistance in Tax Matters Act 2020, rather than the previous wording, which was other enactments for similar purposes, so that this question of legal professional privilege, the legislation will now be very specific to the Act, the Mutual Legal Assistance in Tax Matters Act, and double taxation agreements, so that we have more or less adopted the entire proposal made by the Leader of the Opposition, and we have improved it. The Leader of the Opposition also spoke to another matter, asking that the order that is referred to in the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, that the order be subject to negative resolution. We looked at that. On the face of it, it appears simple, but it is not. And the reason why this change has been requested is that there was a similar provision in FATCA, or there was a similar provision before, and when we passed FATCA, which we had to do with a special majority, so we had to go along with what was being asked of us by the other side, the provision to lay these agreements in Parliament had been removed. But I want to advise members opposite, sometimes you don't always get proper advice from your learned counsel. If one goes to the report before the House, we are reinserting that clause in the committee report, on page 223 of the committee report. We are reinserting a clause, and the change being made is renumber clause 5. This is in the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018. Renumber clause 5 as clause 5.1, and insert after clause 5.1 as renumbered the following new subclause. An order under subsection 1 shall be laid in both houses of Parliament, so that we're putting back in what was in FATCA before. So there's no need to go with the amendment. And in any event, as the Attorney General advised me, it's a presidential order, and you can't subject a presidential order to negative resolution. The Parliament has no power to change a presidential order. But we are putting back in the clause where we are changing clause 5 of, if one goes to the original Tax Exchange Agreements Bill, you have to pull it up online, not from the report. I had that difficulty myself. I went in the report trying to find it. So I went onto the Parliament website and I found it. And if you go to clause 5 of the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, you go to clause 5, what you would see now is, in the bill, is the President may by order declare a tax information exchange agreement specified in the order to be a declared agreement for the purpose of this act. We are now making that 5 subsection 1 and adding a subsection 2 that this order must be laid in Parliament, which is the same thing that was there before we did the FATCA change. Okay? And as I said, we can't negative a presidential order. So to wrap it up, we have accepted the amendment drafted by the Leader of the Opposition, and we have improved upon it by making it specific to the mutual administrative assistant. We have improved upon it, but we have accepted, I don't know why the Leader of the Opposition is behaving like this, Madam Speaker. We have accepted the amendment drafted by the Leader of the Opposition. We have accepted it. And we're just improving it and making it a little better.
As soon as it came, it's the first time we got that amendment suggested. It was never there before.
So, Madam Speaker, I don't think I need to detain the Parliament anymore, because as a wise old soul told me once, you know, Madam Speaker, we came to this Parliament in 1994, some year like that, to change the financial year. And the then Minister of Finance, Minister Motley, told me that he had had a discussion with the then Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Pandey, and he had got his support to change the financial year from commencing or ending in December 31st to ending in September 30th. And the reason for that was simple. We have a rainy season and we have a dry season, so that if you start off your financial year in January, by the time you get around to planning and and organizing your projects, you're in the rainy season. So it was a very practical solution to make the financial year begin on October 1st. So Mr. Motley told me, and I'm reporting now, this is not hearsay, that he had spoken to Mr. Pandey about it, and Mr. Pandey said, no problem, man, bring it. So, came to the Parliament, and the UNC or the ULF, whoever it was at that time, that was ULF, I think. No, we're talking about 1993, 94. Not sure if it was UNC yet, it may have been. Vote against the bill. It was the most astonishing thing. Most astonishing thing. And what was ironic about that whole thing is that in 1996 or 1997 or thereabouts, when the UNC was in government, they brought the same bill and passed it. Exact same bill. And brought and passed it because Mr. Motley had been advised that to change the financial year, you required a special majority. So this is why he had sought the support of the then opposition, which was not given. And then the UNC came in and passed it with a simple majority. The moral of the story is, and Madam Speaker, I'm speaking to you. I would not respond to remarks from across the floor. I'll not respond to remarks from across the floor. The moral of the story is, Parliament is to pass laws. We are here to pass laws. So with the support of the opposition, I beg to move, and we shall pass these laws, Madam Speaker. So don't do a party on there.
Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance. I'm not sure I heard you say you beg to move. Right. Honorable members, the question is that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, and the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 in the 5th Session, 11th Parliament. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The report is therefore adopted. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 66-4, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto, be forthwith read a second time.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto, be forthwith read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 be committed to a committee of the whole.
Honorable members, the question is that the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 be committed to the Committee of the Whole. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause.
Untitled. Yeah, but they know that. And by the way, Madam Speaker, I don't know if I need to say this, but for the record, it's the amended bill in the report. It's the amended bill in the report, okay? Right.
Yeah, because we adopted the report, so it's that bill. Yes?
Clauses 1 to 25.
Clauses, the question is that clauses 1 to 25 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 25 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 25 now stand part of the bill.
Schedules 1 to 6.
The question is that schedules 1 to 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that schedule 1 to 6 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Schedules 1 to 6 now stand part of the bill.
May I just point out that Schedule 6 in the bill before you is actually now Schedule 7 as a result of what happened in the report, okay? So what we're really looking at now to amend is what would be before you as Schedule 6. Old Schedule 6, renumbered Schedule 7.
Which is the last page of the bill.
Page 176 of the bill. 6. 178?
Yeah.
Okay, 178, sorry. 178. I have 176.
So, Minister of Finance, if I understand you, you're saying there are only now 6?
No. What was
Okay.
Schedule 6 is now Schedule 7.
Madam Speaker, it's just so that members could follow in a hard copy, because what we have before us, the report doesn't have the amended bill before it that way. So for the ease of following the proposed amendments, the old bill, what was described as Schedule 6, is in fact now Schedule 7.
Okay. Right. So if members go to page 370.
Last page, 178. Last
They're saying they have page 370.
Not in the report. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm talking from the bill. If you had the old bill in your hand, it would be the final last page of the MAC bill, which is headed Schedule 6 at the top, continued. That's the last bit. So Schedule 6 starts just a little bit earlier at page 176. These are the consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act, Central Bank Act, etc.
But may I ask, in the report, at the page 370, wouldn't that be easier for members to follow? It's headed Schedule 6/7, and I think that captures page 370. Yes. Yes, it's 6 deleted 7. Yes?
Madam Speaker, what happened is that because the report was printed apparently at different times, but in the same text, the page numbers are different. So the page numbers in the report I have are different from yours.
Okay. All right, so we now on page 370, and I think this is where the amended.
Yes, we have an amendment.
Yes.
To Schedule 7. It has been circulated, Madam Chairman.
All right,
So, you go ahead.
1 minute, please, member.
Yeah, you press on.
So, Frank,
Schedule 7.
the question is that Schedule 7 stand part of the bill. The,
Thank you,
Minister of
Madam
Finance.
Chairman. We have an amendment, and it has been circulated to honorable members, and it is typographical in nature. Because we had been at this for so long, we started off with 2016, then went to 2017, then 2018, 2019. So we have to change the years that appear in the original part, okay? And then we have to change the name of the act and so on. It's self-explanatory. You can see what we are doing is simply cleaning up some typographical matters.
Member for Siberia?
We're in agreement with the change of the year from 18 to 19, but I think I would like to say a little more, and I appreciate that the Honourable Minister has acknowledged our input into this amendment, but it's a very important amendment. Because in the report itself, Madam, it stated that you would be removing legal professional privilege from information to be shared. That's what's the existing 117 here. A, you see capital A, B, and then 2 on page 370, referring to 117 of the Income Tax Act, so we've been removing legal professional privilege. And in the report itself, and this is why I want to make the point, because we see reports coming and we think they are complete reports, and they are not always complete reports. So in this report, the issue of legal professional privilege at page, just at the start of the report, page 4, talks about legal professional privilege and reads as follows. During the first meeting, your committee also discussed whether there should be an exception to legal professional privilege as proposed under the consequential amendment of the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501. Specifically, the new clause 1172, which is what we just looked at here. And the committee, whether the clause effectively creates an exception to confidential legal LPP, and whether the LPP does not attach documents or records delivered to an attorney in an attempt to protect such documents or records from disclosure. The report continues at page 5. Following its consideration of these issues, the committee agreed that no further amendments were required. So it was our respectful view that we were removing legal professional privilege in such a manner that we could still comply with the
I'm so
OECD.
sorry to interrupt, Honourable Leader. That's the other bill that we're going to come to, not this one. So we're dealing with the Mutual Assistance Bill and the amendments.
I thought we were dealing with the other one.
The LPP point, it comes up in the
Yes.
TEIA, the Tax Information Exchange. Income tax, sorry, it comes up in the income tax amendment. So that particular amendment that you're referring to, which we've accepted in the redrafted circulated version, that comes up in the other bill which we have yet to bring to committee. So
Okay, I'll be guided.
I apologize for interrupting. Madam Speaker, may I just assist further? The scheduled, the circulated amendments that you have before you, there's a small adjustment to be made to this, and if you'd permit me, please. So you'll see we are amending Schedule 7, and then you go through items A to E. Correct? So we need to insert a new A and renumber A through E accordingly. And the new paragraph A, coming out of some observations that the opposition brought forward to us, we will be deleting the amendments to the Income Tax Act, because we're taking that in the separate bill. That's probably why the member for Siparia was speaking about it, because it was inadvertently referred to here. So one of the observations made by the member was, why put it in the Mutual Assistance Bill, deal with it specifically in the Income Tax Bill? We took that point from the Leader of the Opposition. So what we need to do is the first amendment in the circulated version with respect to Schedule 7 is to say A, delete paragraph A. That's B, big A, capital A, and then you'll renumber capital A, capital B, capital C, D, E accordingly as B, C, D, E, F. Do you follow me?
Yes.
Should it please you? And then that will springboard into what the Leader of the Opposition was just speaking about, which will come up in the Income Tax Act.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Member for Superior?
I am guided. Thank you.
Okay. So the question is that Schedule 7 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 7, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no.
Madam Chairman, I'm just getting some clarity here. I want to make sure that what we're doing is correct.
So this whole bill doesn't apply. So in the amendments, we renumber that as A. So we show it's A.
All right.
Right? And for the purposes of the record, because coming out of committee, what happens is you've readjusted the old thing. Just let me make it abundantly clear. In deleting the big A as we're doing, we're deleting the proposed amendments to the Income Tax Act at section 117A as it would have appeared in the old schedule. So just to make it pellucidly clear so that when we're proofing the bill that is recorded, then we take care of all options.
So this thing that appears as a big B here.
Yeah, that's the old bill. So that in the course of the committee's amendments became A.
And that is gone now.
Yes, and what we're proposing is that that goes in the circulated amendments that we have now put out.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I'll put the question. Again, the question is that Schedule 7, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable members, the question is that the preamble be approved. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable members, the question is that the bill, as amended, be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will resume. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I wish to report that the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with this report from the committee.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
No, this requires a special majority. To move the three reading? Okay, fine. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 be committed to a committee of the whole, or to the committee of the whole.
No,
Sorry. You sure I'm reading right thing?
It was considered in committee. I wish to report that it was considered in committee.
Just hold on, hold on. No, I know. The procedure is so long. I apologize for that. This procedure is quite lengthy. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto, be forthwith read a third time and passed. It's called in Spanish.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto, be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This bill requires a 3/5 special majority.
Mr. Al-Rawi,
Aye.
Mr. Imbert,
Yes.
Mrs. Robertson-Regis.
Aye.
Mr. Dialsing,
Aye.
Mr. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Cujo,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Dr. Gadsby Dolly,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Dillon,
Aye.
Mrs. Critchlow Coburn,
Aye.
Mrs. Webster Roy,
Aye.
Dr. Francis,
Yes.
Mrs. Jennings Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Leons,
Yes.
Mr. Antoine,
Yes.
Mr. Coffey, Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Basabi Sassa,
Yes.
Mr. Charles,
Yes.
Dr. Rambachan,
Yes.
Mr. Karam,
Yes.
Dr. Tiwari,
Yes.
Dr. Munilal,
Yes.
Mrs. Newallo-Hosein,
Yes.
Dr. Gopi Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Indar Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Padara,
Yes.
Dr. Budo,
Yes.
Mr. Pari,
Yes.
Mrs. Gaideen Gopi Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, the results of the division is as follows. 35 members voting for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions.
Honorable members, with a division of 35 members voting for, 0 members voting against, 0 abstentions, the motion for the third reading of the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018 is approved.
Bill entitled An Act to Implement the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states to provide for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and matters incidental thereto.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having recovered from the effects of the Spanish, I think I have the correct procedure now. In accordance with Standing Order 66-4, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states, providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes, be forthwith read a second time.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes be forthwith read a second time. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 be committed to the Committee of the Whole.
Honourable members, the question is that the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 be committed to the Committee of the Whole. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. This House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause.
Madam Chairman, there are no amendments to this bill. So with your leave, I think we could just do clauses 1 to 10.
For the guidance and assistance of all members, we are 373 of the page 373 of the report. Okay. So the proposal is that we take it en bloc. Yes? Yes.
Clauses 1 to 12.
The question is that clauses 1 to 12 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 12 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 12 now stand part of the bill.
The preamble.
The question is that the preamble be approved. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be now reported to the House. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will resume. The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I wish to report that the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with this report from the committee.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This bill requires a 3/5 special majority. Clerk will take the division.
Mr. Al-Rawi?
Aye.
Mr. Imbert?
Yes.
Mrs. Robinson-Regis?
Aye.
Mr. Dialsing?
Yes.
Mr. Hines?
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell?
Aye.
Ms. Cujo?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Yes.
Dr. Gadsby Dolly?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Aye.
Mrs. Critchlow-Coburn?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster-Roy?
Aye.
Dr. Francis?
Yes.
Mrs. Jennings-Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Leons?
Yes.
Mr. Antwine?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Passad Bissasso?
Yes.
Mr. Charles?
Yes.
Dr. Rambachan?
Yes.
Mr. Karan?
Yes.
Dr. Tiwari?
Yes.
Dr. Munilal?
Yes.
Mrs. Newallo-Hosein?
Yes.
Dr. Gopi Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Indar Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Padarat?
Yes.
Dr. Budo?
Yes.
Mr. Pari?
Yes.
Mrs. Gayadeen Gopi Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Ramada?
Yes.
Madam Speaker, the results of the division is as follows. 34 members voting for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions.
Honorable members, with a division of 34 members voting for, 0 members voting against, and 0 abstentions, the motion for the third reading of the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018 is approved. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam.
I guess we are all anticipatory today. The clerk will read the bill the third time.
A bill entitled, An Act to Make Provision for the Implementation of Agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation and for related purposes.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 66-4, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, be forthwith read a second time.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, be forthwith read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As provided by Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 be committed to the Committee of the Whole.
Honorable members, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 be committed to the Committee of the Whole. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This committee will now go into the this House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause.
Clauses 1 to 4.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 4 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. The Minister of Finance or Attorney General.
Yes, Madam, the Attorney General can explain.
Madam Speaker, it was just repetition. So we had agreed in the committee to delete these things. But because we are doing this on the other point, we just, in the committee, had decided to delete these words. They are just simply repetitious. It was just cleaning up.
Well, Member for Siberia?
No objection, Madam.
The question is that clause 5 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 5 as amended now stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 7.
The question is that clauses 6 to 7 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 6 to 7 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 6 to 7 now stand part of the bill.
In the proposed amendments to, it says to clause 8, but in the bill that I have before me, which is at page 383 of this big document, the report, we are looking at amending clause 8, but it seems to me that what is in capital A of the amendments is referring to what is in clause 7. Yes. So are we deleting 7?
No. So section 117A, capital A, was inserted the last time we did amendments to the Income Tax Act. And so on several occasions, actually. And what we're doing in 117A is a cross-reference. That new 117A, which was put in some time ago, speaks to the parameters of section 1171. So it's correct in its reference. The amendments which you have proposed, Leader of Opposition, are to be caught in the references from 117 capital A back to 117 by the insertion of the new subclauses.
So we're looking at clause 8 then?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll now close 8.
So 7 is gone. So
Yes.
Clause 8.
The question is that clause 8 stand part of the bill, and we agreed on clause 8. as amended?
I just want to put on the record
I wanted
that
to put some
Alright,
matters
just
on the
a-
record.
okay.
I
I'd
just want to
started in
put
the wrong
on the
place at the
record
start.
that the opposition leader has proposed amendments. We have accepted them, and the AG has made a slight improvement to them.
Madam Chief, if I can, before the leader wishes to put leader of the opposition somewhere on the record, the concept of legal professional privilege is a careful one. We took note of the proposed amendments coming from the leader of the opposition. We were grateful for that submitted in writing. It wasn't as clear in the committee. We didn't have something in writing, so we thank you for putting that in. When we were dealing with the settled version now in circulation, we took specific reference back to the expert coming from the OEC, from the Global Forum, Mr. Donald, and his position was to encourage us to specifically be clear that legal professional privilege doesn't attach to documents if there was an attempt to use LPP to hide them or specifically to hide beneficial ownership. It's why we made the suggested amendments in the way that we have. There's one caveat that I wish to draw onto the record. We have in this law said that LPP, legal professional privilege, will be determined in accordance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm just drawing a caution that we've not heard from the Global Forum on that point. We've taken the leader of the opposition's recommendation, but I want to put an asterisk on the record. We don't have a position from the Global Forum yet on that, because that potentially runs A, into the position that the Global Forum may come back to us on this issue. B, we're dealing with the choice of law. C, if we don't deal with choice of law, we may run afoul of, or we may have to deal with the rules of renvoi or double renvoi as they relate to the application of law from an international law conflict perspective. So that's a technical way of saying we may very well be told by the Global Forum yet that we have to look at this again, and if that's the case, obviously there'll be a fulsome discussion between the opposition and the government. Thank you, ma'am.
Leader of the opposition.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy that, that the proposed amendments, which I shared with the Minister of Finance last night, I also gave my rationale for why we wanted to make this amendment, so I'm glad you have accepted it, but I do have another concern, which is that in the report, and I was making a point earlier, but now in respect to this bill, that these reports that come from GSCs are not always complete. And it is that one document which was shared in the committee, and I have to thank Senator Saddam Hussein because he was a member of the GSC. There was an email from Chantal LaRouche of the Parliament, an email to members which dealt with the issue of legal professional privilege, as well as some other issues that were taken on board. But the report at page 4 reads that during your first meeting, your committee also discussed whether there should be an exception to legal professional privilege as proposed under the consequential amendment of the Income Tax Act, which is what we are now dealing with. The following issues arose during discussion of this issue: whether the clause effectively creates an exemption to confidential professional relationships, including legal professional privilege, and that legal professional privilege does not attach to documents or records delivered to an attorney in an attempt to protect such documents or records from disclosure, nor does it apply where the committal of a criminal offense is involved. Following consideration of these issues, agreed no further amendments were required. This is what the committee is saying. But the email that was exchanged from the Parliament to members of the GSC dated 20 September 2019 dealt with, firstly, whether the GSC has asked the OECD, and these are the responses from OECD, the GSC has asked for the following in terms of information upon request and spontaneously can be provided notice to be given to affected persons. Now, this was a matter I'd raised in FATCA, and I know you have now included giving information where you're sharing a person's information. They must know it's happening. The second had to do with legal professional privilege, and this is the response. The question was, should there be an exception to professional privilege as being provided for under the new 1172 of the Income Tax Act, which is where we are. And the email is very clear. Jurisdictions are not required to provide information which would disclose information which is the subject of attorney-client privilege. Against this safeguard must be compatible with the EOI. The attorney-client privilege attaches to any information which constitutes confidential information between a client and an attorney, solicitor, other legal representatives, and it continues in that way. In other words, it is saying that you can have this exception and gave the kinds of conditions, which is what the amendment seeks to do, which is to say, for purposes of 117 of Income Tax Act, information is subject to confidential professional relationship where the information reveals confidential communication between a client and his legal representative. So we clearly preserve the LPP here. If the communication is produced for purposes of seeking or providing legal advice or use in existing or contemplated legal proceedings. And this will not apply in cases where information which is communicated or given with intention of furthering a criminal purpose. So in that case, it will not be exempt from LPP. Documents or records delivered to his legal rep in an attempt to protect the documents or records from disclosure, and information on the identity of a person, such as a director or beneficial owner of a company. I take the AG's words about we may have to come back if we have the forum when the matter if a dispute takes place, who will determine it is privilege or not. We said the law of Trinidad and Tobago. I took this from Anguilla, and I sent to the Honourable Minister of Finance last night what happened in Anguilla and their peer review, which I'm sure he will share with you. The whole rationale why we use that, where Anguilla has not been penalized thus far, to the best of my knowledge. So you may want to check that as well to see, up to their peer 2 review, they were not impugned for using the law of Anguilla as the law for this purpose of settling disputes. So I thank you again for that review, but I think this was such an important document which had been left out of the bundle of documents in the JSC report, and it brings us to other JSC's report, because maybe if we had seen this earlier, we could have saved us all being here a month later. You could have gone off to Paris with your law all well and truly passed when we were here last time. So I think I would ask if it is that emails, correspondence shared internally in a committee where information is requested from a third party, in this case, information is requested from the OECD to determine, must have this, or can there be another way? And they did suggest a way. So in future, with no disrespect to the parliamentary staff, or for those who compile these reports, it is most important. And this dealt with 3 major issues for resolution. So again, Minister of Finance, who took my phone call and said he still had my telephone number saved. I thank you for taking the call, and I thank you for putting this into effect through Honourable Attorney General with your help. Thank you very much, so we can pass this and go home. Thank you.
Yes, Madam
Attorney
Chairman.
General.
No, just let me say
Minister of
something.
Finance.
Firstly, I would always take the calls from the Leader of the Opposition, so no need to thank me for that. I just want to put on the record that the communication from Saddam-Hussein came on the 20th of September 2019.
Yes.
Okay? If you go to this report,
I was
you
trying to
will
find the
see
date.
this report was dated November 20th, 2019. So it was after that communication. And it is because of that communication that I did not lay the report in the last session of Parliament. The last session was prorogued around the 20th of September, sometime like that. And I had the opportunity at the time to lay the report, but because there was this outstanding matter that came in just before Parliament was due to be prorogued, I deferred the laying of the report, and we laid it on the 20th of November.
But are you sure, with due respect, page 5 of the report says November 20, 2019?
Yes.
And this correspondence came in September.
I can assist everyone on this point.
Hold on.
Yeah,
I
before,
just want to put on the
We're on the same
record
page, yes.
that the email from Senator Hosein came 2 months before, and it is because of that email, and it was obvious to me when the Parliament was going to be prorogued that we did not have consensus on this matter, this particular matter of legal professional privilege, that we delayed the laying of the report in the Parliament, and I sent it over, I sent the work of the committee over to the next session, the one we are in now, and I reconvened the committee simply to discuss this point and some other points. And that is why in the report of the committee, you see reference to the comments of Senator Hosein, because at page 10 of this report, it says Senator Hosein raised the concern whether there should be an exception to legal professional privilege as proposed under the consequential amendments. And then it goes on to say, we had some discussion on it, and the CPC rep told us that this clause is a mandatory requirement in order to be compliant with the OECD. I'm just saying this is what we were told then. And as members of the committee, we went back and forth on this. As I told you last night, we had a lot of discussion on this because we were going back and forth. And we relied upon the experts to tell us whether this was mandatory or not. We were told that it was mandatory, and we were also told that the things that would normally be the subject of client-attorney privilege would not be taken away by this amendment. So we were told two things, that it's mandatory, and two, it does not affect the issues that the Honorable Senator was raising at the time. Now we have come to this place, and I think what we have done is we've dealt with everything. We've dealt with what we've been told, that this is mandatory. We've dealt with the theory that the clause will not affect legal professional privilege, and now we have tightened it by putting in words to make it clear to the practitioners that this thing will not affect legal professional privilege, okay?
May I be permitted?
You're a good spinner.
3 points, please, Madam
If I may just a short response, and just for the record again, the email giving the position of the OECD is dated 20 September 2019 and sent to all members.
Yes.
The report is dated November 6,
Yes,
2019.
afterwards, yes.
After.
Yes.
But this report, and in this one they said was mandatory. But then why didn't you deal with this?
And we did. That's what we dealt with at the meeting.
He just read from the
That
report.
is what we dealt with at the meeting. We discussed that email. That's why we reconvened and had another meeting of the committee specifically to discuss that.
Okay.
Madam
understand?
Chair.
And you decided not to make
Well,
any
we were
changes.
told then that two
It was
things.
mandatory.
That it's mandatory and it would not affect normal legal professional privilege.
Just for maybe 3 small points. The reason why that email didn't go in is that we laid a 4th report and a 5th report. It's not in the 5th report. The 4th report is where we would have caught the email of Senator Hosein. That's point 1. So it isn't the Secretariat's fault. In fact, the 5th report did not need to have it because it came in the 4th session. It would have been in the 4th report. That's point 1.
That would have been
Interim, yes. So there's no fault to the Secretariat, and I just wanted to make that clear because we were very ably assisted by the Secretariat. The second point is, the reason that we didn't make the amendment for LPP in the fashion that we're doing today is specifically because in the FATCA debate, Section 117A of the Income Tax Act was created. And that had the provisions of LPP defined the way it was. Secondly, the points that the Minister of Finance has made, A, the mandatory nature of the OECD's insistence of this, and B, the fact that the position in LPP is that matters of fraud, etc., vitiate LPP, and that we would have been bound by the regular provisions of LPP's parameters. What the amendment today does is that it makes express that which is implied. The last point that I wish to make, out of an abundance of caution, in respect of the other bill that we already completed as it's related to this, is for the purpose of proofing this bill as it goes to the Senate, I want to make it abundantly clear that when we amended the income tax amendment bill, the MACMA, the Mutual Assistance Bill, when we amended the Mutual Assistance Bill, what I said on the record then, and I want to repeat it, is that we're deleting the reference to the Income Tax Act, Section 117A. Whether that is in paragraph A or paragraph B, I want the proofers to know that we are talking about the 117A in that, out of an abundance of caution. And it is for that reason that we're referencing these amendments at this point right now. Madam Chair, there's one last position. The Official Journal of the European Union, as published on the 27th of February 2020, speaks to the state of play of the cooperation of the EU with respect to commitments taken by cooperative jurisdictions to implement tax good governance principles. And under transparency, they specifically say that the following jurisdictions expected to make tangible progress for information EU states granted until 31st December 2020 to do so. And they highlight Turkey, Anguilla as well. I'm pointing this out to you because the leader of the opposition asked us to check, and I think she was on the right track. I'm pointing out that Anguilla is going to be reviewed on its LPP exception. That's why I've asked you to note for the record that we may very well have to come back, potentially, hopefully not, unwind the very amendments that we're making today. A, because it's inconsistent with FATCA. B, it is under review by the Global Forum right now, Anguilla's position on this, and the only precedent that there is to follow in the amendments that we're making today is Anguilla. So I'm drawing the caution that it's not that we don't know what we're doing, we're going ahead with extreme caution on this point. Thank you.
Member for Superior.
Of this package, would it take us off the blacklist?
Madam, if I could explain, I thank the Leader of the Opposition. It's a very important point. The Global Forum has several steps. The first step is Common Reporting Standards, CRS. The Common Reporting Standards requires us to do the mutual assistance, the tax information exchange, and the income tax amendments, which we're doing today. That will allow us to sign the mutual assistance aspect and begin common reporting by tax information exchange. The next step that we have to get to is the base erosion profit sharing position called BEPS. And there's one more step, it's the special economic zones or the replacement law to free zones. We have already drafted the BEPS provision and the economic zones position. The EU, I should mind, the Global Forum, is extremely time sensitive on this. So Cayman Islands was just blacklisted by them because they submitted at 4:30 in the afternoon as opposed to 4 o'clock. So when they give you a deadline date and they tell you 4 o'clock and you submit at 4:30, they'll blacklist you globally. It's a subject of major concern around the world. So there are two more steps to come in. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have to apply the automatic exchange of financial information to be compliant for that and the exchange of information. So it's effectively that. So there are three steps. We're doing step one, CRS, Common Reporting Standards. Step two, BEPS and SEZs, steps 2 and 3. And there's a process of signing to the treaty, and then they come back and review us pair 1, pair 2, etc. So we have a small process to go. We'll get it done in our second tenure in 2020 to 2025.
More troops to Paris.
But for information,
Primo,
just
yes.
for information, AG, the BEPS does not require legislative action. It could be done by amending methodologies within the government.
Most definitely requires legislation. The SEZ requires, the BEPS inclusion in SEZs will require legislation, so that base erosion point will find itself in the legislation for the SEZ. We're looking to bring it immediately. We're working on it. We're doing the fine-tuning. They wouldn't sit with us to do these things until we had turned this key, which is why we were pushing on this.
Member for Shigona East.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Honorable Attorney General, I think for completion, maybe you might want to indicate with respect to the mutual assistance agreements as another part of the process, how many of those that will be expected to sign and the time frame.
We're signing a convention. And once you sign the convention, then you can go in.
I just wanted to, so that we'll be able to have an appreciation of the process involved for completion.
So if we had kept on track from 2011 when we signed up to Global Forum, we would have to have negotiated 13 different treaties. Because we arrived in 2015, September 2015, and we had not had any work done, we were compelled to ask for fast track. They sat with us and said, look, there's no way you could do these 13 agreements, so we'll give you a second option, which is to do a multilateral treaty. And if you sign to that treaty, you effectively get all 13 in one shot. So we'll do the multilateral convention instead.
And that's the point I'm making. When you sign the convention, you avoid having to do 13 individual agreements. That's the good thing about the convention.
Okay, and just for clarity and the record, we've only circulated one set of amendments. We've been hearing amendments from the Leader of the Opposition and improvement of amendments here.
We have adopted
Only one set of
the
amendments.
Leader of the Opposition is free to refine what I am saying, but we have adopted the substance of the proposed amendments from the Leader of the Opposition, and we have drafted our amendments. So what you have before us is our amendment.
Okay? So,
No, I said we adopted yours.
yeah,
Oh gosh, how much time you want me to say that?
yeah, the amendment, right? The question is, no, all I'm saying is, we understand that in your contributions, reference was made and sort of commendation was given to something that was circulated between you all, which originated from the Leader of the Opposition. So that it's just to make it abundantly clear that that is not something here
Correct.
before us. It doesn't.
Correct. That's
okay?
between us. It's not, has
Yes,
not been
it hasn't come
circulated
to the
by
floor
the
yet.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
So
Okay.
the only amendment is the one before us.
Yes. Right, good. Okay, so the question is that clause 8 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 8 as amended now stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
The preamble.
The question is that the preamble be approved. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable members, the question is the bill as amended be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. The House will be resumed. Minister of Finance.
I wish to report that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with the KPG FAR amendment. I now beg to move that the House agree with this report from the committee.
Honorable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This bill requires a 3/5 special majority. The clerk will take the division.
Mr. Al-Rawi.
Aye.
Mr. Imbert.
Yes.
Mrs. Robinson-Regis.
Aye.
Mr. Dialsing.
Aye.
Mr. Hines.
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell.
Aye.
Ms. Cujo.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Dr. Gatsby Dolly.
Aye.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Mr. Dillon.
Aye.
Mrs. Critchlow-Coburn.
Aye.
Mrs. Webster-Roy.
Aye.
Dr. Francis.
Yes.
Mrs. Jennings-Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Oliver.
Yes.
Mr. Leons.
Yes.
Mr. Antoine.
Yes.
Mr. Coffey. Mr. Coffey.
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Pasadbi Sassa,
Yes.
Mr. Charles, Dr. Rambachan,
Yes.
Mr. Karen,
Yes.
Dr. Tiwari,
Yes.
Dr. Munilal, Dr. Munilal,
Yes.
Mrs. Newallo-Hosein,
Yes.
Dr. Gopi Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Indara Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Padara,
Yes.
Dr. Budo,
Yes.
Mr. Pari,
Yes.
Mrs. Gaideen Gopi Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
Madam Speaker, the results of the division is as follows: 34 members voting for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions.
Honorable members, with a division of 34 members voting for, 0 members voting against, and 0 abstentions, the motion for the third reading of the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 is approved. Clerk.
A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501.
The Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If ever they woke me, Madam Speaker, they woke me, if I may say. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 67(1) of the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1128, hereinafter referred to as the Act, that the Minister may by order amend Schedule 1, and whereas it is provided by the said Section 67(1) of the Act, that every order made under this section shall be subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament, and whereas the Sexual Offences Amendment to Schedule 1 Order 2020 was made by the Minister under Section 67(1) of the Act on the 26th day of February 2020, and whereas it is expedient to approve the said order, be it resolved that the Sexual Offences Amendment to Schedule 1 Order 2020 be approved. Madam Speaker, I am very pleased on this occasion to move a very important amendment to the Sexual Offences Act. Madam Speaker, sexual offences stand as the number 2 most prevalent and heinous crime in Trinidad and Tobago after murder. The statistics demonstrate that the judiciary has observed specifically that we are battling a scourge of crime as it relates to sexual offenses. Every day in our newspapers, we are unfortunately made witnesses to the grotesque and gruesome savagery of our very young, our very innocent, and our very dear and cherished persons. Babies, young women, young boys, men, women, grandmothers are victims of this. In today's newspaper alone, we saw a young teenager have a 75-year-old man allegedly drag her into the bushes and assault this young lady. A grandfather at 75, the village atmosphere that we long to return to, when uncles and aunts could discipline a child, where our children could walk safely by in neighborhoods. We watch this scourge in our society and we wonder, where does this sickness come from? Madam Speaker, today we specifically in this order seek to include in the schedule, the first schedule to the Sexual Offences Act, we seek to add into Chapter 1128 the following offences: sexual intercourse with a female under 14 years, sexual intercourse with a female between 14 and 16 years, sexual intercourse with a male under 16 years, sexual intercourse with an adopted minor, sexual intercourse with a minor employee, householder, etc., permitting defilement of a minor under 16 years of age. Why are we doing this? Madam Speaker, this is born in the history of the evolution of the Sexual Offences Act. In fact, Madam Speaker, it was in 1986 that the Sexual Offences Act, number 27 of 1986, was born. It was then Attorney General Russell Martineau in the saddle of Attorney General. And what we did here is that we did a consolidation of a number of our common law offenses. We birthed Act number 27 of 1986. And this particular act saw us actually bringing into statute sexual assault by a husband in certain circumstances. It was this law that modernized the concept of marital rape, which is now a commonplace feature in our laws. But back then in 1986, we were struggling with the concept of a husband raping his wife. So far back it seems, so normal it is now that consent must be provided even within wedlock. In this particular province, Madam Speaker, we saw some interesting amendments come to the Sexual Offences Act in the year 2000. Then Attorney General Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj brought forward an interesting concept of having a sex offenders registry. But the sections included then to create a sex offenders registry, Madam Speaker, those provisions inserted into the law under that Part 3 of that law introduced by AG Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, the new sections 34 onward, two things happened there. We passed the law, and then the population, in particular the Attorney General, the government, because of the changes in the politics that were ongoing the year 2000, 2001, 2002, we saw effectively the law passed and never operationalized. That was a tragedy, because in the period 2000 to 2019, not a single sex offender was put onto the registry. And I'd like to say that that is probably because the law was badly drafted. Probably not seen then. In no way do I lay any blame to AG Maharaj at that point. But the point is, the law as cast under the notification requirements provided that the minute that you were convicted for an offense under the Sexual Offences Act, you had to find yourself reporting to a police station. How can you be convicted, be sent to jail, and then go and report? Because it was at that nonsense that you would find yourself having been put to jail. So you couldn't actually report. So the law, I don't know how it passed, but the law was passed, causing a man who was being taken away in handcuffs to go to jail to find himself before a police station to report. In any event, what we did, we took very careful note of this provision, and we as a government brought forward the proposals in the 2019 version of the laws that I as Attorney General piloted and passed. In the Senate, we went to a special select committee. We heard from a number of interest groups. We heard from a number of organizations, and we made a very comprehensive reform to the Sex Offenders Registry. Madam Speaker, in the tradition of this government, in this incarnation, we not only passed the law, but we sought to implement the law. We went and we consulted with the stakeholders, the Commissioner of Police, etc., the Judiciary, and on the 31st of January 2020, we brought the Sex Offenders Registry into effect. As is usual as Attorney General, we are very careful in our office to make sure we double-check everything. And what we noticed is there was an inadvertent step taken in the special select work where we failed to pick up laws which had been repealed. And let me explain that. When we passed the Children's Act, Act number 12 of 2020, Madam Speaker, we repealed Section 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 21 of the Sexual Offences Act. Why? Because it concerned children. We migrated those offenses as new offenses into the Children's Act. Now, the Interpretation Act is very clear that when you repeal a law, it doesn't automatically stop people who were charged before the repeal from going through the process of a trial, acquittal, or conviction, etc. In other words, then, stopping a law existing today does not mean that the charge that you are facing and the potential conviction that you suffered or acquittal that you suffered doesn't count. And that being the case, Madam Speaker, and we as a government going a step further, we have been tracking the sexual offenses cases in the courts. And we are actively aware that there are persons on the docket, persons whose trials have been completed but not yet sentenced, who fall into the category of Section 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 21 of the Sexual Offences Act. Madam Speaker, if you'd permit me very quickly just to mention some of this information. The Children's Authority has published, as at the period May 18, 2015 to October 31, 2018, the Children's Authority set out abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. Madam Speaker, the Children's Authority's statistical information demonstrates that in our beautiful Trinidad and Tobago, there have been sexual abuse cases for children 0 to 11 months, 1 to 3 years old, 4 to 6 years old, 11%, 1 to 3 years old, 5.4%, 7 to 9 years old, 12.6% of the cases, 10 to 13 years old, 24.3% of the cases, 14 to 15 years old, 25% of the cases, and 16 to 17-year-old, 21.3% of the cases. Let me repeat that. 0 to 11 months, 0.4% of the cases. That's what Trinidad and Tobago is. They didn't decide. I'll give you the total in terms of the numbers that come before the courts in just a second. But what we see, Madam Speaker, is the gender of sexual abuse victims over the past 3 years is 84%, nearly 85% female and 15% male, roughly. So our little girls are being savaged in our country. And this government, in its holistic criminal justice stamp out crime march of operationalization, be it white-collar crime, money laundering, guns, sexual offenses, we believe that we need to take steps to make the public part of this equation. And that's why we brought very significant amendments to the Sex Offenders Registry. Every year, Madam Speaker, as Attorney General, having the privilege to be the creator or originator of some laws, I've chosen specifically to take certain causes close to my heart. The abolition of child marriage, the creation of a sex offenders registry. These are two examples of issues close to my heart, so that at least I could say, whilst I had the privilege under Prime Minister Rowley of conducting an office, that at least I left my mark personally to make a better place for all of our children of Trinidad and Tobago, as we all do as members of Parliament, each and every one of us, opposite and on government side. So, Madam Speaker, the statistics coming out of the judiciary show us an incredible situation. Sexual offenses for the period, before I get to the pending matters, sexual offences, Madam Speaker, in the context of the magistracy and also the High Court is one statistic I'd like to put on the record. What I can tell you, Madam Speaker, is that the research shows us in the period 2000, when we birthed the Sex Offenders Registry, to 2019, there were 1,461 cases in the magistracy, 232 cases in the High Court, for a total of 1,693 cases. The number of persons ordered and put onto the Sex Offenders Registry, 0. So this country had 1,693 cases and nobody was put onto the Sex Offenders Registry. That's why probably repeat offenders happen, because we don't know who they are. It's the same battle we're fighting on, the battle on bail restrictions. We know that thousands of people have passed through with firearms, and yet in the tenure of this government, we can't get support to restrict bail. Under the UNC, if you had a sidearm in your possession, no bail. 120 days, no bail for you. If you're a policeman and you had a firearm and you committed an offense, no bail. Under this government, we can't get support to put that law back in. Not good enough for us. Us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. For the life of me, I can't understand that. For the life of me, and for the life of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I implore the opposition to support the bail amendments. I genuinely implore you, as we did today, and we passed law, finally, I beg you on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, let's look at the statistical position. That's the number of people not on the register, 0. 0 people on the register. Listen to this. Statistics of convictions for sexual offences at the Magistrates Court, Madam Speaker. When we take the period 2009 to 2018, and we come across the position, we've had 1,461 convictions for sexual offences. Rape, attempted rape, sexual intercourse without consent, sexual intercourse with a female under 14 years, sexual intercourse with a mentally subnormal person. Madam Speaker, in the hundreds in each category. No sex offenders registry. We as a government birthed the registry on the back of law which we brought, operationalized it, we're tracking the cases in court. We know we don't want to let anybody off that registry. Why? Because we put a safeguard. We've said if a judge considers that you should be on that registry, you should be on that registry. People ought to be able to know who their neighbors are, who you're hiring in your business, who you're hiring as domestic help at home to look after your children. And Madam Speaker, when we get to the High Court, we see a statistic in the period 2000 to 2018, 232 people in the High Court, that's indictable matters, convicted. Nearly 1,700 wicked souls in this country, raping and abusing our most vulnerable. And I would like to say to my colleague, the member for Tobago East, I'd like to say to the Minister of National Security, I'd like to say to the member for Laventille West, I'd like to say to the member for San Fernando East, I'd like to say to the Minister of Agriculture who sits at the LRC, the Minister of Health who sits on the LRC with us, thank you on behalf of the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for operationalizing law. You see, we make joke about architecture. We heard Oropouche East, Oropouche West, forgive me, a little bit earlier, making joke about the constant reference to architecture. This is no joking game. If you don't have a whole of picture plan, the way we do, the way the Attorney General's office runs, where we're tracking every aspect of crime, plant and machinery, people, processes, law, and you're operationalizing law, then you're in the wrong game. And I would like to say, Madam Speaker, I had the pleasure of attending the Financial Action Task Force as they considered our criminal justice reform, and this is part of it. I had the pleasure of leading the team Trinidad and Tobago into the face-to-face assessment January 6th and January 7th in Trinidad and Tobago. And I would like to say today, publicly on the record, because the world has celebrated Trinidad and Tobago's performance. It's not the Attorney General's performance. Trinidad and Tobago's performance in our criminal justice reform. And Oropouche West, in another place, in another time, was in effect mocking the reforms that we've had. But today, permit me to say, on behalf of the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, thank you to Team Judiciary, to Team TTPS, to Team National Security, Team Ministry of Health, Team Ministry of Finance, Team Office of the Prime Minister, Team Office of the Attorney General. Thank you to the CPC's department, Mr. Ian McIntyre, Senior Counsel, to Ms. Ida Eversley, who is the Deputy, now acting currently as Chief Parliamentary Counsel. I want to say a special thank you on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago for the hard work and commitment in taking us over the finish line in this bill. I'd also like to tell Trinidad and Tobago a success story as I come to an end. There is a young lady in the office of the Prime Minister. Her name is Ms. Viana Sharma. She was working at the office of the Attorney General under AG Ram Logan. As you all know, it's public record. I kept the entire staff of the AG's office. Everybody I inherited from my personal secretary come down, I met working there. You notice there's not been a scandal from the AG's office? You notice we put our heads down and done our work? Well, Ms. Viana Sharma, who was elevated to the head of the anti-terrorism unit, Ms. Viana Sharma was made the co-chair of the International Cooperation Review Group for the Joint Group of the Americas in recognition of the sterling work that Trinidad and Tobago has done and that she in particular has done. A little bright spark of Trinidad and Tobago so impressed the world. And for everybody that is paying attention, I want to underscore, this is a PNM Attorney General, the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, able to say something that no other government minister who sat in that position is able to say. We kept everybody employed. Normally in Trinidad and Tobago, it is slash and burn, as AG I said in that seat. Normally it is slash and burn, but that is not the case. The Office of the Attorney General does work for the whole of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, and every creed, race, and political party has a place in that ministry under my watch as Attorney General and under Minister Fitzgerald Hines' watch as a cabinet minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General. So, Madam Speaker, this amendment is critical. We've carefully scrubbed the need for this. I'm sure that my colleagues opposite ought not to have any complaint or problem with this amendment, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that the Sexual Offences Amendment to Schedule 1, Order 2020 be approved. Member for Kumutu Mansinga.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I listened to the member for San Fernando West, and I was a little bit amazed that the member did not indicate why these sections that were repealed in 2012, how they would have benefited citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The AG indicated through his contribution figures which were, in fact, offered, the same figures that were offered in 2019 during the members' debate regarding the ages of sexual abuse being 0 to 11 months, at being 0.4%. The figures were basically very much the same that was said then. And I was wondering, why would the minister bring exactly what was said then, as opposed to making an argument for what has happened now? And Madam Speaker, you know, history is in fact a very important aspect of life. It records past events, and it helps us to understand what transpired in the past and why. I would like to give credit to 3 attorney generals in the past. Attorneys general. And that is, the first one would have been our own esteemed former Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, and Anand Ramlogan. And the reason why I want to give credit to these 3 attorneys general is because it took great pains to ensure that the rights of citizens were protected under our Constitution. And as a result of it, Madam Speaker, when they came to Parliament, they came with the understanding that our Constitution and the rights of citizens are to be protected, and even if there were aspects of it to be violated in the pursuit of catching those who are guilty of a crime, great pains were taken to ensure that the rights of those who were lawfully obeying the law would be protected. And so I want to just go back to a bill that was laid by Werner St. Rose, who indicated the purpose of bringing this important bill to the House. And she indicated that, and if I may read into Hansard, the most recent Sexual Offences Act of 1986 provides yet another example. Although the Act attempted to modernize and consolidate the criminal law dealing with sexual abuse, including child sexual abuse, common law principles inherited from England, reflecting outdated social attitudes, remain embedded. And so there's a reason why these sections were in fact repealed. She indicated further, she said it needs to be stated that in keeping with the state's obligation on the Convention of the Rights of the Child, a process of re-examination of the laws relating to the protection of children commenced during the period 1995 to 2000 and culminated in the enactment in 2000. The package included the Children's Authority Act, the Children's Community Residences, Foster Homes and Nurseries Act, the Miscellaneous Provisions Children Act, the Adoption of Children Act, and the Children's Amendment Act. The statute comprising this package is intended to work together to establish an effective child protection regime. However, the last mentioned, the Children Amendment Act of 2000, did not deal with many of the deficiencies identified in the Children Act over the last several decades by various committees and task forces. Indeed, since its enactment in 1925, the Children Act had been amended 19 times. She indicated that these amendments, although well-intended, represented a fragmented and piecemeal approach to the development of an effective child protection regime for the children of this country. And Madam Speaker, this was also the view of Attorney General Anand Ramlogan. Mr. Ramlogan indicated that the history of this bill would show that its lineage could be traced directly, and again, he said the 1925 Children Ordinance. And he indicated at that time, the definition of a child was a person under the age of 14, with which in itself out of sync with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which we signed since 1990 and ratified in 1991, but the convention defined a child as a person who is under the age of 18. Now, since that time, there were a number of piecemeal amendments to that law, culminating in Act number 68 of 2000, which was not proclaimed. The AG made note that piecemeal approach showed that we were approaching this question with a knee-jerk legislative reaction. And every time a problem erupted, we would try to react rather than be proactive. And there was no comprehensive plan to actually take on board children's rights and treat with 1/3 of the population, which he estimated at that time to be between 350,000 to 400,000 young citizens. He said there was never a master plan to address their rights in the law, to update it. And so the reason why these sections were in fact repealed, Madam Speaker, there was no intention at all for anybody to fall through the loop. As a matter of fact, I would have, at the time it was Senator Diyal Singh, who said in 2012, this bill seeks to provide some sort of legislative framework to support Trinidad and Tobago's position in the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. So, in fact, not only the member for St. Joseph now, but also the AG, who was then senator, indicated, in the opposition that is, indicated the importance of, in fact, having this bill updated and recognizing that now, because we are under the UN Convention, that the rights, that the child is now considered to be under 18 years old. So the amendments and the adjustments that were made, which Senator Verna St. Rose indicated, she gave an outline of all the new section. But once it was repealed, she indicated that following the election of 2010, that the cabinet had agreed in 2010 of December to refer the Children's Bill to the Legislative Review Committee to determine policy issues relative to, 1, the offenses of sexual touching and sexual grooming, 2, the age of sexual consent, and 3, the imposition of more stringent custodial penalties. And so when this bill came before the Legislative Review Committee, they were further directed that the bill should be subjected to wider stakeholder view and reviewed by an ad hoc committee chaired by Mrs. Stephanie Daly. And so, Madam Speaker, when we look at the Schedule 1 of 2012, we would have noticed that the very sections that the Honorable Minister is seeking to amend today, although they were removed, these new aspects of the law came into being, whether it was in fact grooming and every other matter that was addressed here. The Honorable Minister has not indicated, and that's the concern here, has not indicated what and why this is in fact coming back, and everything that is required here concerning children is addressed in the Children's Act. The Children's Act takes care of every child, and a child by definition, according to the UN Convention, would be anyone under the age of 18 years old. So, Madam Speaker, it's not my intention to delay this House any longer, but just in fact to understand that the Honorable Minister indicated that there was no registry, and as such, there were no persons who were in the registry for a lack of it, and indicated during his contribution that the law might have been badly crafted back in 1999, when it was in fact proclaimed in 2000. And my question is, shortly after that, the People's National Movement would have been in government until 2010 May. Why is it, if the then government thought that the bill was badly crafted, why did it not take the opportunity then to correct it? That is the first thing. The second thing is that when law is being crafted and it comes to the parliament, the opposition has the opportunity to make amendments, to object, to clarify, and if it was badly crafted then, is it that the then opposition were caught with their pants down? So, no, I think you understand everything that I'm saying. So the minister is indicating that significant work was done. And the minister is actually has taken on the full minister.
Please, members. Proceed.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sorry. As a result of it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the question is really, among many questions, after all this hard work that was in fact done under the astute leadership of Kamala Persad-Bissessar under the UNC government, why is the Honorable AG of the opinion that all this hard work was solely done by himself, when we in fact have data, we have information, we have on record the number of meetings that were held, whether it's in select committees, whether it was by various consultations, stakeholder consultations, extensive. As a matter of fact, it's on record in the Hansard, where the Attorney General, when the bill came, when the draft came to him, he sent back the ministers. There were two ministers at the time. There was the Minister for Gender and Child Development, as well as the Minister of the People and Social Development. He actually sent them back on 3 occasions and indicated to them that they should, by wider participation, ensure that all stakeholders are on board, so that when we bring this bill to Parliament, that every aspect that could be considered will be in fact put in place for. But you know, the Attorney General then, Mr. Ram Logan, indicated, as I stated earlier, that there is this habit to bring piecemeal legislation to the House. Whenever there is something wrong, we react as opposed to ensuring that proper things are put in place. And to me, today is an example of that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because I'm wondering, when this bill was brought in 2019, didn't the minister recognize that he wanted to put back these amendments or make these amendments? Why wait until all these months? Is it that someone told him he missed out on something? What is the reasoning for coming today, as opposed to dealing with the matter as a whole in 2019? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of course, we are never against ensuring that the rights of our citizens are protected, particularly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, persons who are affected by any matter of abuse, and more importantly, sexual abuse, especially when it targets our children. The figures that the Honorable AG gave, he gave those figures, those very figures, in 2019. Today, the minister indicated that they are tracking the cases in court. And so if they are tracking those cases in court right now, why didn't the AG bring figures of how many persons, because he said, the Honorable Minister said that the registry is in fact operational. So if it is in fact operational, I would have thought that the minister would have come today and say, well, we have in fact 14 people, 100 people, the 1,600 persons that we have been able to recognize from 2000 to 2019. But that has not been said at all. As a matter of fact, what has been told is a rehash of figures of what was said back in 2019. So in my humble opinion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm of the view that the minister really does not have any registry that is operational. And so I would like to just conclude, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by indicating that this, the opposition has no intention of seeing any persons who have been affected by any sexual abuse being hindered in any way from seeking, getting their due date in court, getting help, getting, seeing their perpetrators brought to justice. Absolutely not. But I'm just interested in understanding why is it the minister has to bring it now, and there was very little explanation as to why, when in fact we understood why in 2012 these very sections were repealed. I thank you.
Attorney General.
Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I genuinely tried very hard to understand the contribution coming from Kamuto Manzanilla. And most respectfully, I could not find the argument. For the benefit of the record, I'd like to say I did expressly indicate that the government, in the course of operationalizing the sex offenders registry, went to the courts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and identified that there were still matters that persons may have been charged with that needed to be brought into the schedule. This legislation is brought for general purport out of an abundance of caution. For me to come today and accept the invitation from Kamuto Manzanilla to name the cases would be to convert this legislation into offensive legislation which would be shut down by the Privy Council. The case is Lienage. It went to the Privy Council. You cannot pass law to treat with a case, Kamuto Manzanilla. And I thought, as the first responder, that one of your colleagues would have assisted you. I am sure, not being an attorney at law, that you would not have known that, but to explain it to you in simple terms, you can't mark people so. You can't pass law to affect individuals. You have to pass law for general purport and intent. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I cannot accept the exhortations of my learned colleague. Further, Mr. Deputy Speaker, nobody's pants was down, opposition or government. We are not interested in understanding whether our pants was up or down on this side. We're interested in the law. And what we can tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the abolition of these sections from the Sexual Offences Act was as a result of the Children's Act 2012, which incorporated these offences as new offences. So nobody's pants was down. The second thing in that sub-argument is that I think my learned friend forgets. We debated the sexual offences bill here, you know. We had a special select committee in the Senate. So really, this is not a blame game, you know. This is a clear situation where the Attorney General has come to say we've operationalized law out of an abundance of caution. We want to ensure that the schedule is populated with repealed offences as well. It's quite simple. I was somewhat surprised at the accolades offered to Attorney General Ram Logan, because he has the record of having touched nothing in terms of the law with the children of this country and in protection. That is not the case for the member for Siparia. If there is one piece of law that I think was very much worth the while for the benefit of children, was the Children's Life Fund. I think that that was an excellent piece of law. And the member for Siparia did well as Prime Minister of this country to pilot that law and bring it in. It's still serving children. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and for that, the member for Siparia certainly deserves the commendation and acknowledgement, and no one should take that away from the honourable member. I can't associate Attorney General Ram Logan with that at all, however. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think that this is really very straightforward and clear law, and I certainly hope that we would find a unanimous voice in supporting this bill, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Sexual Offences Amendment to Schedule 1, Order 2020 be approved. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Friday, the 6th of March at 1:30 p.m. On that day, the government proposed to do motion number 3 under committee business. Be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Private Security Industry Bill 2019 in the 5th session, 11th Parliament. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Friday, 6 March 2020 at 1:30 p.m. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Friday, 6 March 2020 at 1:30 p.m.